What if I told you that in Denmark, some people who commit serious crimes never serve a single day in prison? No cells, no bars, and no punishment in a way most people understand it. Instead, they are sent for treatment, sometimes for years, sometimes for life. It sounds outrageous, doesn't it? A system that doesn't punish the criminals, but instead focus on rehabilitation. But what if I told you that this isn't about being soft on crime? What if I told you that this is about something far more complex? Something that most people never truly consider. And before we dive into it, I just want to point out that I have over 20 years of experience in the healthcare sector, 6 of them in hospital psychiatry, but I have worked with a psychiatric patient in all settings in the Danish system. And let's now dive into it, because I remember the first time I had to care for someone who had committed a violent crime. He had assaulted a stranger in the street unprovoked, leaving them unconscious. When the case was brought to trial, the court determined that he wasn't accountable for his actions in that way that most people are. He had untreated paranoid schizophrenia, which made him believe that the person he attacked was out to kill him. It wasn't an excuse, it was a fact. And in Denmark, our legal system recognizes that not all crimes comes from the same place. Some crimes are driven by greed, revenge, or power, while others are driven by an entirely different force, the misfiring of the human brain. And if someone commits a crime because their mind is fractured, can we truly say that punishment will fix the problem? And that's why in cases like this, we don't send people to prison. We send them into treatment. And this isn't some easy way out. It is often a far longer and more restrictive process than a traditional sentence. Let me tell you about another case, a man with severe bipolar disorder. It was untreated for years, and suddenly he believed he was invincible. He stole a car, drove recklessly through the streets and causing an accident. No one died, but several people were injured. In another country, he might have faced a few years behind bars for reckless endangerment, maybe even longer for the damage he has done. In Denmark, the courts looked at his medical history, saw the pattern and ordered treatment instead of prison. He was institutionalized for over a decade, receiving care, medication, and therapy. Now someone might ask, why should he get treatment instead of punishment? Why shouldn't he pay for what he did? Here is where the Danish system is a bit different. The goal isn't punishment. The goal is to prevent it from ever happening again. A person in prison doesn't necessarily get better. They get locked away, and when they come out, they might be even worse off than before, especially if they got a diagnosis. A normal, well-functioning adult will see prison as a punishment. Someone with a diagnosis where the diagnosis has forced them to commit crime will just get out and still have the diagnosis and still be untreated. However, a person in treatment can be stabilized, monitored, and reintegrated into society in a way that makes sure the crime isn't repeated. This isn't a system that lets people walk free. It's a system that acknowledges that justice isn't just about retribution. It's about making sure no one else gets hurt. And sometimes treatment lasts far longer than a prison sentence ever would do for the same crime. I have met patients who have been institutionalized for 15, 20, 25 years. Some of them will never be released because their condition makes them a permanent danger to themselves and others. The difference is they are where they can be managed, not locked in a cell and forgotten, but in a place where their illness is understood and controlled. I once worked with a man who spent nearly his entire adult life in psychiatric treatment under a court order. He had killed someone during a psychotic episode. It wasn't a cold-blooded crime. It was an act driven by delusion. And now, decades later, he was stable, medicated, and aware of what had happened. He told me if they had just thrown me in prison, I would have died there and I wouldn't even have understood why. That's the thing about our system. It doesn't just look at what someone did. It looks at why they did it and whether locking them away does anything to stop it from happening ever again. Now, of course, this doesn't mean that all crimes in Denmark escape punishment. The vast majority still serve their sentences, but when a crime is committed due to severe mental illness, something outside the control of the person committing it, we take a different approach. It is not an easy solution, it is not a perfect one, but it works better than throwing them into prison. And some people think justice is about making people suffer for what they've done. But in Denmark, we look at it differently. We don't ask, how do we punish them? Instead, we ask, how do we make sure it never happens again? And another question we also ask is, how can we make them a positive impact on society? It doesn't matter if they have a mental illness or if it's a non-mental illness that is cause of the crime. It is, can we integrate them into society in a beneficial way? That is the core essence of the Danish judicial system. And that is why in cases of severe mental illness, we don't send people to prison. We send them to treatment. Not because we are weak on crime, but because we are serious about stopping it.